In February 2004, a bright 21-year-old nursing student named Maura Murray packed up her car and drove into the snowy mountains of New Hampshire. Hours later, her car was found crashed on a rural road, the engine still warm, her belongings inside. But Maura was gone. No footprints in the snow, no signs of struggle, just silence. In the 20 years since, her disappearance has become one of America's most enduring mysteries. Was she running from her life? Did she meet with foul play? Or did Maura Murray vanish into the woods, leaving behind only questions? To understand Maura's disappearance, you first have to understand Maura herself. Born in Hampshire, Massachusetts in 1982, Maura was the fourth of 5 children in a close-knit Irish Catholic family. She was intelligent, athletic, and disciplined. At just 21 years old, she was already a standout nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Friends described her as kind, funny, and fiercely determined, the kind of young woman who seemed destined for success. But beneath the surface, Maura was struggling. Her college years had been marked by quiet turbulence. She had once attended West Point, one of the most prestigious military academies in the country, but left after a minor brush with the law and transferred to UMass. Even at Amherst, she faced setbacks. Just days before her disappearance, she had been caught using a stolen credit card to order food. It was a small offense, but for someone like Maura, it carried heavy consequences. In early February 2004, Maura's life seemed to spiral. On February 5th, she broke down at work. While on her shift at a campus security desk, her supervisor found her crying, completely inconsolable. When asked what was wrong, all she could say was, "My sister." Hours later, when her sister was contacted, she revealed she hadn't spoken to Maura about anything serious that day. Whatever was troubling her, Maura wasn't ready to share it. The next few days only deepened the mystery. On February 7th, Maura spoke with her father, Fred, and borrowed his car to shop for a new one. That night, she crashed his car on the way home from a party. Police arrived, but no serious charges were filed. Her father was frustrated, but he didn't sense anything unusual. Then came February 9th, the day she vanished. That morning, Maura emailed her professors, claiming she'd be out of town for a family emergency. She contacted her work supervisor as well, repeating the same excuse. In reality, there was no emergency. Instead, she packed her car with clothes, toiletries, and a box of wine. She withdrew $280 from an ATM, stopped at a liquor store to buy alcohol, and began driving north. No one knows exactly why she left. Some believe she was planning to start fresh, to escape the pressures of school, legal trouble, and a failing relationship. Others think she was meeting someone, a friend, a secret lover, or even a stranger she'd met online. What is certain is that by mid-afternoon, Maura was on a snowy back road in Haverhill, New Hampshire. At around 7:30 p.m., a local woman heard a loud thud and looked out her window to see a car crashed into a snowbank. When police arrived minutes later, they found the car still running, its hazard lights on. Inside were Maura's belongings, her ID, her packed clothes, her schoolwork. But Maura herself had vanished. No footprints in the snow, no signs of struggle, just silence. It was as if she had stepped out of her car and disappeared into thin air. But as investigators would soon learn, Maura's disappearance was only the beginning of a mystery that would haunt America for the next 2 decades. The witness noticed a young woman standing by the car. She appeared shaken but not injured. Another neighbor, a school bus driver returning home, pulled up alongside her. He rolled down his window and asked if she needed help. The young woman, who matched Maura's description, politely declined. "I've already called AAA," she said. But phone records later confirmed, no such call was ever made. The bus driver returned home and called the police. Within 10 minutes, an officer arrived on the scene. By then, the car was locked, the airbags deployed, and Maura was gone. Inside the car, investigators found troubling details. There was a box of wine with traces of red liquid spilled across the seats. In the back were her schoolbooks, clothes, toiletries, and even stuffed animals. Nothing suggested she intended to abandon her car and disappear permanently. But the strangest detail was what wasn't there: Maura herself. The snow around the car showed no footprints leading into the woods. No signs of a struggle. No trail of blood. It was as if she had simply stepped out of her car and vanished. Police initially treated it as a missing persons case, but their response was slow. They believed Maura might have wandered into the woods, perhaps under the influence of alcohol, and would turn up the next day. But as hours turned into days, the reality became undeniable. Something far darker had happened. Her father, Fred Murray, rushed to New Hampshire as soon as he heard the news. He searched the woods himself, calling out his daughter's name, refusing to believe she could just be gone. Family, friends, and volunteers joined in, combing the area with dogs and flashlights. The dogs did find a scent. For a short distance, Maura's trail led from her car down the road, but then it stopped abruptly as if she had been picked up by another vehicle. That detail changed everything. If Maura had accepted a ride, who had she gotten into the car with? Was it a kind stranger or someone with darker intentions? And more importantly, was she still alive when she left Route 112 that night? The investigation would soon spiral into dead ends, conflicting theories and accusations. And the more people searched for Maura, the more tangled her mystery became. In the days following the crash, Maura's disappearance gripped the small town of Haverhill. Police launched a search, but their approach raised questions almost immediately. For the first 24 hours, they treated Maura as a voluntary runaway. She was a young adult, they reasoned. Maybe she had chosen to leave her life behind. But Fred Murray and Maura's family insisted otherwise. This wasn't like her. She had left her clothes, her textbooks, her belongings, even her cell phone, behind. Nothing pointed to a carefully planned escape. As the hours turned to days, volunteers poured into the area. Helicopters scanned the woods. Tracking dogs were brought back to the scene. Once again, the dogs followed Maura's scent for a short distance down Route 112, before it vanished into nothing. It was as if she had been swallowed whole by the night. Theories began to swirl almost immediately. Some investigators believed Maura had wandered off into the freezing woods, perhaps intoxicated and succumbed to the elements. But if that were the case, why hadn't her body been found despite hundreds of searchers scouring the area? Others believed Maura had chosen to disappear. They pointed to the email she sent to her professors, the alcohol in her car, and her recent personal troubles. Maybe she had reached a breaking point and wanted to start fresh somewhere else. But then there was a darker theory, that Maura had been abducted. The stopped scent trail, the lack of footprints, the fact that she vanished within minutes of the crash all pointed to one possibility. Someone had picked her up. If that was true, the question became chilling. Who was on Route 112 that night? Rumors soon swept through the small community. Residents whispered about suspicious neighbors. Some pointed fingers at local men with criminal pasts. Others were convinced Maura had arranged to meet someone secretly, perhaps a boyfriend no one knew about. As the investigation pressed on, every theory seemed plausible. But with no body, no clear evidence, and no witnesses beyond the neighbors who saw her car, the truth remained maddeningly out of reach. And then, as the years passed, Maura's case left the quiet roads of New Hampshire and exploded onto the internet, where thousands of strangers became obsessed with solving the mystery themselves. As the years passed, Maura Murray's case refused to fade. Instead, it grew larger, fueled by the internet, media, and a community of strangers who became obsessed with finding answers. In the early 2000s, true crime forums and message boards began dissecting every detail of her disappearance. Users posted timelines, maps, and theories, debating endlessly about what happened that snowy night on Route 112. Some claimed she was kidnapped by a local predator. Others argued she ran away to start a new life. A few even insisted she had taken her own life in the woods. Theories multiplied until the case became more than a mystery, it became an online movement. Every piece of evidence was scrutinized. Why did she email her professors about a family emergency that didn't exist? Why did she pack alcohol and clothes in her car? And most of all, why drive into the middle of nowhere with no clear destination? The media soon joined in. Documentaries, podcasts, and television specials featured Maura's story, framing it as one of America's most haunting cold cases. The attention brought new tips, but it also created confusion. Some leads were based on speculation, others on outright misinformation. The noise around the case often drowned out the facts. For Maura's family, the spotlight was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it kept her name alive. On the other, it invited invasive questions, conspiracy theories, and even accusations. Her father, Fred Murray, continued to search tirelessly, never accepting the idea that his daughter had simply chosen to vanish. He believed someone had taken her, and he wanted justice. As the online obsession grew, amateur sleuths even traveled to New Hampshire, retracing Maura's last known steps, knocking on doors and digging into locals' lives. The case became a breeding ground for speculation, sometimes crossing the line into harassment. Yet through all the noise, one truth remained clear. No one could explain how a young woman with so much ahead of her could vanish into thin air. And just when it seemed the case had gone completely cold, new theories and potential sightings began to surface, sparking hope and fear that Maura's story was far from over. One of the earliest claims came from locals who believed they saw Maura walking late at night, miles from the crash site. Some insisted she had been spotted in nearby towns, disoriented but alive. Others swore she had been seen much farther away, in Canada, even in Florida. None of these sightings were ever confirmed. Theories multiplied. Some investigators leaned on the idea that Maura had wandered into the woods and died of exposure. But critics pointed out that extensive searches, with dogs, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers, never found a trace of her. Not a body. Not a shred of clothing. Nothing. Another theory suggested Maura had planned her disappearance. Supporters of this idea pointed to her email to professors, the cash withdrawal, and the alcohol in her car. Perhaps she had been overwhelmed by stress and wanted to start over, leaving everything, even her family, behind. But skeptics asked, how could a young woman vanish so completely in an age of bank cards, surveillance cameras, and cell phones? If she had started a new life, why had no one heard from her in nearly 2 decades? Then there was the darkest theory of all, that Maura had been abducted. The stopped scent trail, the lack of footprints, and the timing, disappearing just minutes before police arrived, all hinted at the possibility she had been picked up by someone with bad intentions. For years, suspicion fell on local residents, truck drivers, and even people who joined the search. Yet no hard evidence ever tied anyone to her disappearance. In 2019, a potential breakthrough came. A house near the crash site was searched after rumors spread that Maura's remains might be buried in the basement. Ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies, raising hope that an answer was finally near. But when authorities dug, nothing was found. Another dead end. The frustration only deepened the mystery. Each new theory seemed plausible, yet none could explain everything. And so, 2 decades later, the case of Maura Murray remains unsolved. But the legacy she left behind, and the obsession her disappearance sparked, may be the most haunting part of all. The case endures not just because of the unanswered questions, but because of who Maura was. A young woman full of potential. A daughter, a sister, a friend. Someone who, like so many others, carried private struggles but also big dreams. Her disappearance reminds us that behind every cold case file is a real human being whose life mattered. For her family, the pain never ends. Fred Murray, her father, has never stopped searching. Even as the years have taken their toll, he continues to push for answers, demanding justice, demanding truth. Her siblings and loved ones keep her memory alive, refusing to let her be forgotten. For the public, Maura's story became something larger. A symbol of how fragile life is, how quickly someone can vanish, and how a mystery can capture the imagination of a nation. Her case has inspired countless podcasts, documentaries, and discussions, but at its core, it remains heartbreakingly simple. A young woman went missing, and those who loved her are still waiting for her to come home. Some believe Maura is out there, living under a new name, far from the chaos her disappearance created. Others believe she met a tragic end that night on Route 112, her body never to be found. Until the truth comes to light, her fate will remain suspended between hope and despair. Maura Murray's story is more than a mystery. It's a reminder of the questions we may never answer, and of the lives that deserve to be remembered even when the trail runs cold. What do you believe happened to Maura that night? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to hear another chilling disappearance, stay with me for our next case, the Springfield 3.